Good evening, Excellencies and distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us today at the International Cooperation to facilitate the adoption of e-mobility for the sustainable development in GGGI members. I'm Eileen Her, Associate in Community of Practice Transport of Global Green Growth Institute. We'll be hosting this event tonight. This event is pre-event for P4G Summit, jointly organized by Global Green Growth Institute, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and the Partnership for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030 P4G. The event is structured around two sessions. The first session is presentations to presenters from the Global Green Growth Institute, and P4G will advocate green growth through each organization's e-mobility strategy. After the two presentations, we'll move on to the panel discussion moderated by Dr. Hyungnam Shin, Assistant Director of Global Green Growth Institute. This session will be the venue for innovative and interactive discussions involving policymakers, experts from financial institutions, industry representatives, sector experts on the e-mobility strategy for sustainable development and green growth. Before we start the session, I would like to share the welcome remark arrived from His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, President and Chair of GGGI, 8th Secretary General of the United Nations.
Dear distinguished panelists and guests joining this important virtual side event organized in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea and the P4G, it is my distinct pleasure to be part of this GGGI P4G side event on the theme of e-mobility for sustainable development. I'd like to thank everyone involved in today's very important event, including the P4G and the various speakers and experts from the public and private sectors, international organizations, and civil society. This wide participation from across borders and sectors is a testament in itself to the high demand and importance of this event. During the 20th century, we could read and hear much about the so-called ingenuity of mankind, how we could fly to another continent for a short weekend vacation, or how we can deliver a package to another city or country overnight. We touted that as long as you have the money, you could bridge short and vast distances with style and comfort, and we all race to improve the standard of living this way. Fast forward to today, where the world population is about to reach 8 billion very soon, and the greater portion of the population does have the money to spend and contribute to climate change. The transport sector, which accounts for nearly 1/5 of total greenhouse gas emissions, is projected to only increase, and quite substantially, in the coming decades. That is why the majority of the world's nationally determined contributions, NDCs, identify transport as a priority area. We know now that this is not sustainable. Thankfully, there have been exciting technological progress in this area. To name one obvious example, the historic rise of Tesla, a relatively new automaker that produces electric vehicles only, to become more valuable in market cap size than the next several automakers combined in just a few short years, demonstrates the mega trends in mobility and the great potential for electrification to be an important pillar in decarbonization. This event is particularly timely and relevant as the global community seeks to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. As the world's governments and central banks mobilize trillions of dollars in recovery and stimulus packages, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to make sure recovery efforts are green and have electric mobility as a pillar. The new momentum of calls from consumers to commitments by governments and companies, not to mention the recent technological advances and the dropping costs of technologies to make them more readily available, should not be wasted. I am very pleased that GGGI organized this event to help share and understand the latest developments and success stories so we can seize the momentum. I hope you will discuss openly what has worked and what has not worked, and how to overcome hurdles at the regulatory, technical, financial, and partnership levels so we can help each other work towards carbon neutrality. Allow me to wrap up by impressing upon you, the panelists, experts, and distinguished guests, of the importance of this topic and the timing. I thank you, and I wish a very green and successful event. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you, President and Chair, for sharing your thought and welcome message with us. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Frank Reiserberman, Director General of Global Green Growth Institute, to deliver his keynote speech. Now, over to you.
Thank you, Eileen. Good evening, or good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. This is, I don't know, the how manyest P4G side event that we are in this week. There are many. They're all like this, mostly online. But there is a very clear message, I think. We are stepping up not only to net zero 2050, but to ambitious targets for 2030. And the number of times I've already heard this week, civil society leaders request President Moon to set a target at 45 to 50% by 2030, I can't count. Going definitely in the right direction. And indeed, I've seen private sector companies, energy companies, make strong commitments in line with net zero by 2050 as well, which is also new. But I think most people would agree that while the majority of the focus is on the energy, power, electricity sector, the number 2 area of concern is transport. And yes, if we look at, for instance, all the NDCs, then you see that in, I can't seem to click. Do you do the slides, Kiwa, or do we need, what do we use? I will use a clicker rather than the machine. You see that in 86% of all the NDCs, transport is identified as a key source of greenhouse gas emissions. And indeed, many countries, 54 we've counted, list concrete actions. What are those actions? Well, we already heard from our president and chair that a lot of it will have to do with electric vehicles. And if I may add a personal touch, I happened to work for Google, the company in California in 2007, where when I started, Google announced that every employee who would buy a Prius, a hybrid vehicle, would get $4,000 subsidy. And I can tell you that led to parking lots filled with Priuses and a couple of Teslas for the wealthier Googlers among us. But at that time, that was still a tiny blip. I don't think I could have foreseen that a few years after that, I would go to Fiji, where the government had done a similar sort of import promotion event, and a large number of Priuses had flooded the Fiji market, and indeed people were blaming Priuses for causing traffic jams. It has gone quite fast, although I think maybe not yet fast enough. In this slide, you see that Bloomberg New Energy Finance is forecasting that electric vehicle adoption will go up pretty rapidly. But likewise, while Bloomberg Renewable Energy Finance had predicted that renewable energy would be introduced very rapidly, time and time again, they underestimated the trend, and reality was that it would be much faster. And in fact, many of you will have noticed that the IEA, the International Energy Agency, just published a Net Zero 2050 report, and they forecast that if we are to reach Net Zero 2050, electric vehicle adoption would have to increase 18-fold. I think that's rather a steeper curve than what we see in this diagram. But I think there's no doubt that electric vehicles have been introduced pretty rapidly for, if you like, well, mostly hybrid and electric vehicles in Norway. We'll hear later on the panel how rapidly and maybe also why. But the hydrogen vehicles that I think the market was also betting on, particularly here in Korea, are still pretty rare. If you live in Seoul, like I do, then every once in a while you see a Nexo, a hydrogen-fueled car, but there are not that many yet. Does that mean that, like in some other technologies, electricity has won out and hydrogen will disappear? Well, actually, our experts think that they will both exist next to each other, that electric vehicles will be dominating light vehicles and small cars, and that hydrogen will be necessary for big trucks, possibly for maritime transport as well. So I think that's another of those important trends that we'll be discussing this evening. What are the real solutions that will help us make transport more sustainable? There are obviously some really big questions about what technologies, how can we scale it up, what kind of government measures actually influence public behavior, or maybe how can we use climate finance or ODA to speed up electric mobility or sustainable transport adoption. That is one area where GGGI has worked for a few years now. In general, we support our member countries to accelerate the green transition, to transform, if you like, through that achieve their NDCs and SDGs. And we do that through a combination of policy work, sometimes green growth plans or more ambitious NDCs, but all the way to indeed more targeted policy measures like higher feed-in tariffs, or possibly subsidies for electric vehicles, or experiments with battery exchanges for motorcycles in countries where those dominate the transport sector. So policy work, but we believe combined with investment projects is a very happy and healthy combination. Sometimes the policy work is necessary to enable investments. Sometimes the investments are necessary to start up or open the markets to show to private sector companies that these are indeed attractive projects to invest in. So specifically for electric vehicles, we have collaborated with quite a few partners on capacity building, on technical assistance, and on policy and regulatory advice. Or to put it a bit differently, in quite a few of our member countries, we count about 17 of the over 30 countries where we are active with technical support, are we working on e-mobility. So it's, if you like, smaller than our area, our work in renewable energy, but it's growing pretty rapidly. I can tell you a few years ago, we did our first electric bus projects, but since that time, since the last 2 or 3 years, almost every country we work in is interested. They haven't necessarily made real progress, but they're all very interested in sustainable transport or e-mobility. So what can we do? Well, we have done some e-mobility policy work, like a national e-mobility strategy for Nepal that the Prime Minister launched, and that helped the cabinet decide that the government would buy 300 electric buses. They haven't all been bought yet, but we have helped some municipal bus companies buy buses. So that is having an impact. And because there are still quite a few large-scale public transport infrastructure projects, particularly bus rapid transit systems like we have here in Seoul as well, and those projects still somewhat routinely plan to use diesel buses. So we have had a number of projects to say, hey, if you are going to make a big investment in a BRT project, then you should really consider electric buses. And we believe that while the initial purchasing price of an electric bus might be higher, the lifetime cost, the life cycle cost is lower. So there are, in fact, very strong arguments to make that switch now and not be stuck with more expensive diesel buses for a long time. But yes, then there are also countries where private transportation is really dominated by motorcycles, particularly in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. 90% of the traffic can be motorcycles. And in fact, there also we see that not the highest quality, not these electric Harley Davidsons you might have seen, but small Chinese-made electric motorbikes are already cheaper, certainly in life cycle cost, than their fossil fuel alternative. So yes, demonstrating through investment projects that e-buses or e-trikes are feasible, and of course working on the charging infrastructure as well, is sort of a pilot activity on the verge of scaling up in quite a few countries. We already tell countries, we don't really want you to buy 3 or 5 buses. We want you to think of significantly replacing the number of buses, changing the fuel mix in your bus fleet in the years to come, so to speak. And yes, in some cases that means even thinking, if you do highway projects, how you can make such large-scale infrastructure e-mobility ready. Coming to the end of my few slides, for the next few years, and by the way, in next presentations, you'll learn a lot more detailed information about our projects, but wrapping up now, where we think the priorities will be in the next few years, and I'm hoping the panel will discuss this and either agree with me or disagree or maybe sharpen up these kind of priorities. First is that I think we'll be doing quite a bit of work on contributing to promote e-mobility solutions, not only buses or vehicles, but smart transport infrastructure and systems, including BRTs and intelligent transport systems. And yes, that will have to go hand in hand with facilitating and enabling policy environment and sometimes eliminating policy bottlenecks for private sector adoption of e-mobility. Because in the end, it's not the 20 buses for the municipal bus company, it is the 1,000 buses that private operators run in the city that all need to switch to electric. We do also think, even though it's a bit further off, that particularly for small island developing states and for island countries like Indonesia and Philippines, maritime transport is particularly important. So we are very happy that we have a maritime transport expert on the panel this evening to discuss how we see opportunities for that sort of hard to decarbonize, but also important segment of the transport sector as well. And finally, we would like to discuss, but we think actually that maybe not the brown or gray hydrogen we have today, but green hydrogen, once we can use renewable energy to produce hydrogen, could be a way to decarbonize particularly heavy transport and maybe even ships at some point in time. So those are some key questions for the panel, some key priorities of where we think e-mobility, sustainable transport will go. And I'm handing it back to our colleagues to have more detailed presentations and hopefully an interesting panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, for sharing your vision. And now I would like to invite Mr. Chang Sun Chang who's the transport lead in Global Green Growth Institute. Over to you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Chang Sun, lead in transport and sustainable mobility in GGGI. It is my pleasure to present GGGI e-mobility strategies through introducing the GGGI strategies, activities, and our future plan. So electric mobility and electrification of the transportation is a mega trend in this year to tackle the climate change and transform all of the economy into a more sustainable. So in this line, GGGI in the transport sector will give priority to mainstream the sustainable transport strategy into a national, local, and regional policies and development plan. And also we are trying to develop sustainable transport project or program that applying e-mobility solution to transport infrastructure and system investment. Lastly, in order to make sustainable in electric mobility, we tried to strengthen and support relevant stakeholder capacity. When we are working together with our partner countries, we are approaching the holistic view. So first of all, we're providing the technical support, and through the technical support, we are providing some input and advice to our member. And also we strengthen our member countries' capacity to identify their needs and how to tackle the climate change through the electric mobility. So through the technical advice and support and capacity building, we are making some enabling environment. And based on the enabling environment, we are working together with our member to develop and design the e-mobility project and program. So the program and project we are developing step by step. First stage is we are analyzing, we are providing our technical assistance and assessment. And also at the same time, we are providing the capacity building program. So through the activities, we are conceptualizing the transport project. And based on the project, it actually facilitating the project and developing the project, there is some kind of the regulatory framework. So second stage is we are designing national, regional, and local regulatory framework. And based on that, we support our member country to design, develop the project. So in order to make some project and mobilizing financial resources, we are providing our technical support, including conducting the feasibility study. And we are preparing the concept note and the investment proposal. That means that we are support our member countries' full value chain. And finally, we will see the implementation, our vision and our project. So it is quite very sure that electrification of the transport is a necessary solution to tackle the climate change and make economic model into a sustainable. But electric mobility is quite new technology. So many of our stakeholders and members quite reluctant to introducing the electric mobility. So that's why we tried to link electric mobility solution to smart public transport infrastructure or system. Second, we also designed the best solution and we applying the e-mobility component to relevant project, kind of the eco tourism project. One of the components should be the electric mobility. And last one, in order to make the electrification of the transport sustainable, it is very essential to facilitating the participation of the private sector. So in terms of the linking the e-mobility solution to public transport infrastructure system, for instance, GGGI has been developing integrated sustainable transport project in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in collaboration with AFD, France development agencies. At the same time, the Ethiopia government secured the financial resources from the AFD to install the BRT system. So we suggest them to install the electric vehicle on the BRT line And we are now supporting the government and AFDB to see the feasibility through our technical support. Yes, also we are designing the electric mobility project. So in terms of the Nepal, to maintain a pristine environment, the Pokhara metropolitan city in Nepal, GGGI has been developing smart e-mobility project. And we are also mobilizing financial resources from Multi-Development Bank and the GSHEF as well. So in order to realize the project, we suggest a best technology solution. So e-mobility should linking to the IT system. Also IT system also managing the performance of the vehicle. At the same time, they are monitoring, managing the charging system. So this one is all of our supporting area. And lastly, for the Cambodia, we designed the financial instrument and financial mechanism. Through the financial mechanism, we are trying to invite the private sector. So for the potential buyer, they will be delighted to see our financial mechanism. So through the financial mechanism, we are providing the subsidy program, also the sub-loan, line of credit facilities of the mechanism also we are providing. The kind of thing, it is quite useful to introduce electric bike in Cambodia. So GGGI has been also supporting the design and establish policy instruments. So when we are in-depth and comprehensive review of the relevant measures, GGGI identified the most important policy instruments, taxes and financial instruments, financial incentives, and also the R&D program should be needed to make it more sustainable. So that's why we are now supporting our member and the country government to set up their regulatory framework and also the policy and development plan through our guidance. Also, GGGI deliver a diverse set of capacity building activities. First of all, we tried to convert experience gained through the country activities and the producing the corporate communication material for our countries and our members. And also we are providing capacity building and stakeholder consultation regarding how to build their capacity in the e-mobility sector. So these days COVID-19 is quite difficult to face-to-face meeting. So that's why we are designing the knowledge platform. So through the knowledge platform, we are providing lecture to the university and the institution. Also through the platform, we also providing the technical seminar for our member government and our stakeholders. So this is our kind of the project and activities and cases. From the Asia and Africa and South America, these days, many our member countries request us to do some cooperation in the e-mobility sector. So we are very happy to support our member and also our potential member to suggest our best solution to transform their e-mobility transport sector into a more sustainable. So I'd like to finalize my presentation through introducing our e-mobility plan. So as Director General said, we are facilitating the adoption. We will try to facilitate the adoption of the e-mobility and sustainable transportation. GGGI will support each member to transfer into a more lower carbon and resilient economic model in the transport sector through introducing and supporting the e-mobility and the low carbon transport system and also the sustainable transport model to our member country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chang-Sung, for sharing GGGI experience and how we operate on the ground. Now, I would like to welcome Mr. Sarbinder Singh, Director of Investment of P4G, to deliver his presentation. Over to you.
Thanks. Give me a second. I will just put my presentation on the screen. I hope the screen is visible now.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. Just a brief introduction of myself. Yes, I'm Sabinder Singh, Director for Investments. Work for P4G, work with the partnerships to help them mature into an investment proposition. That's what I am looking after within P4G. And I'm sure you're enjoying the P4G Green Week. There have been lots of events throughout this week, and it will continue till Monday. And you're finding it very enriching. And I also want to thanks to GGGI for hosting this, co-hosting this event on e-mobility and sharing their thoughts and giving us also opportunity to talk about what P4G is doing. And in a very simplistic words, I would say that we are trying to take that position, take all these initiatives to the next level, which is how do we bridge that gap where big investors can come and start investing in, building that bridge, and then scaling up these solutions, replicating these solutions, so that bigger aim is achieved. And now talking briefly about P4G. P4G was launched around in 2018 with support from Danish government. Thereafter, Netherlands and Korean government joined the initiative. We are operating out of 12 countries. In LATAM region, it's Mexico, Colombia, and Chile. In Africa, it's Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Africa. And in Asia, it is Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And of course, Denmark, Netherlands, and Korea are providing us that support. What we do is we invest into startup and scale up partnerships, multi-stakeholder partnerships, and help them mature into an investment proposition where they can become financially sustainable. We have invested into 50 partnerships over the last 3 years. Some of those partnerships have now started maturing into investment proposition. Already $300 million worth of capital have been leveraged by some of these partnerships. We have also made a huge impact. 110,000 metric tons of CO2 saved, 500,000 individuals have been positively affected on the ground. That's within 3 years. And we are looking forward to much further growth in what we are doing. One more thing I wanted to touch upon, not only that we touch upon or work on e-mobility, which is part of, I would say, both access to energy as well as sustainable cities, but we are also into food and agriculture, circular economy, and water and sanitation. Going to the next slide, this is where shows what we are trying to do. It's about achieving those SDG goals by bridging the gap between what we are trying to do that bring those innovative ideas on the table, help them scale up, and then take it to the next stage where either blended finance solutions or through institutional investors, they can start investing in. These things become financially sustainable. The impact is not one time, but it continue to remain decades to come. Now talking about a bit of e-mobility, we see that as part of an overall thematic area of energy transition. What we are seeing today is that, yes, we are on threshold of transitioning from oil and gas business to renewable energy. And one of the biggest, I would say, demand creator for renewable energy is going to be electric mobility, even the hydrogen. So zero emission mobility is the key there, which will create demand for renewable energy. So it has to be seen integrated way, and that's how we have strategized our work. When we look at e-mobility, we see it integrated with the utility business. And that's how, when we talk about developing those solutions or investing in those startup ideas, concept ideas, and scale-up ideas, we look from that perspective that, yes, this is how it's going to be. Like very recent IEA study, I think that was published a couple of weeks ago, talks about those things in a big way, like 3,100 gigawatt of battery capacity, 1,870 gigawatt of hydrogen capacity. I mean, unless we integrate this with the utility sector thoroughly, the economics will not be fully realized. The viability of e-mobility will be much better, or zero emission mobility will be much better if we start seeing this in context of utility business. So that's why we say it's the energy transition, and e-mobility or zero emission mobility is part of that. Now, the way we have taken our approach on zero emissions mobility or e-mobility is more of a value chain approach, which starts with the OEMs, talk about the EV infrastructure, and then come down to the user level. OEMs, Frank gave an excellent example that Prius, I mean, was bought by many. And when we talk about Tesla, you can see, how famous that is. So we really are not focusing on the OEM part, but on the downstream of it, which is where the demand is created. And we look at that, what are the elements, which are holding back that demand, or what are the elements which can catalyze that demand, and what are the elements which are acting as hurdles or challenges. And that's where we start looking at that. Yes, I mean, these are the ideas, something worth addressing. And again, in our way, which is like investors, like a startup or a scale up, get that solution on the table, get it accepted by the financial institutions so that it becomes sustainable. And what we have seen in this area, like 4 areas to work very closely on. One, definitely, upfront capital cost is still high for all these, e-vehicles. And there are models, there are innovative business models that can address that. For example, you remove battery from the vehicle, which is almost 35% cost, and bring in a model of like battery lease, swappable battery, integrate battery with the utility business. You got a solution there. And we are working with some partnerships who are looking those things in much deeper, that how to convert that into a business proposition, a sustainable business proposition. The next thing, we have looked at is very closely is that you need a bit of pilots to make people comfortable in adopting the solutions. We haven't ourselves invested in the partial pilots, but wherever through our partnerships we have learned more about pilots, we are trying to disseminate that information. Yes, that it makes sense. The overall TCOs are good. The risk is low, or risk can be defined, and how solutions can be replicated. The other is a utility participation. This is again an area to work very closely. LATAM is the region where we are trying to see, how we can integrate some of the work we are doing in e-mobility with the utilities, how they can be part of this. The next one is, of course, when we talk about, government, we always talk about fiscal incentives. If government provides that, then it can trigger. But we are also looking at that, how government can help in mitigating certain risks. And those risks, if mitigated, can bring the more institutional capital in and scale up all the effort in the e-mobility. So that's how I would put it, in terms of our focus and how we are going about in our way of catalyzing more investments into e-mobility and scaling and replicating the solutions with which we are working. Again, going back to how we do about it, it's not just that we invest as at startup and scale up level, but we also provide the whole ecosystem. We got national platform in all the countries where we operate. And with effectively that national platform means is that there's a representation from government, there's a representation from private sector. With government, you can have a policy dialogue, regulatory support. With private sector, you get access to the market, access to the local private sector, local manufacturing. And these two things, become kind of our pillars, where these partnerships who are coming up with these ideas and implementing in these countries get that support, and they don't have to start everything zero. So that's at a very high level. As I said, like some of our partnerships have taken that benefit. They have reached up to the stage where institutional investors have started investing in those, and those solutions are becoming like sustainable. Next thing, now, so where we are in terms of our e-mobility partnership portfolio, as I said, like it's been only 3 years, and we have made some great progress, and we've funded some of the partnerships in LATAM region. That's where we are heavy in terms of our presence or our activities promoting e-mobility in all Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, and even to some extent in Brazil, actually, I would say. But that's a start. These partnerships are touching upon various areas. Some partnerships are focusing purely on public transit buses. Some partnerships are focusing on micromobility, and some partnership are focusing on the cargo vehicles. So that's the area we're working in. If I look forward, then we're looking forward to work on green hydrogen, expand portfolio of e-mobility or zero mobility vehicles in Indonesia. So those are like prospective areas or countries where we'll be working in near future. Now, where we stand in terms of, so in terms of consolidating, I would say that, invest in us, invest with us, work with us to make, to do things what we are doing in our unique way, much more successful. We do provide an opportunity to all the investors, who can come once these partnerships mature into an investable proposition, come and invest with us, invest in these partnerships. So that's one area, we're looking forward to support. The second area is that while developing the solutions, the partnerships are doing their work. However, if they can get more support from the ecosystem, what we are operating, but even the broader ecosystem, which is more of institutional investor, then the success can be even, achieved in a shorter period of time. And that's the whole motto of P4G that we do with speed and scale. And as I said, with some initial models of success, we are scaling up. We are trying to achieve even more with what resources we have. So that's, what I wanted to talk about today. And just a little bit more about P4G. We got a whole portfolio of partnership in different areas. There's the list. Then we do have, this is the governance we operate under. We got a board of directors, which are represented by, political leadership, private sector leadership, investor leadership, and the civil society leadership. And this is our small team, who is leading all these initiatives. I think with that, I would say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarvinder, and Mr. Chang-san. Thank you again for two presenters for sharing their thoughts and insights, and also strategy for sustainable development in transport sector. After two inspiring presentations, we'll move on to the second part of this event, panel discussion. To bring enriched perspective and insights, we invited 8 honorable panelists today. From government side, we have His Excellency Frode Solberg, Ambassador of Royal Norwegian Embassy in Seoul. We also have His Excellency Anil Dasinghe, Secretary of Sri Lanka Ministry of Environment. And we also have Mr. Alfred Ringjiro, Director General for Transport, Rwanda Ministry of Infrastructure. From international institutions, we have Mr. Sabine Basniat, Senior Energy Efficiency Specialist from Global Green Climate Fund, and Ms. Alexandra Pamela Chang, Senior Transport Specialist from Asian Development Bank. And we also have Mr. Manuela Oliveira, Regional Director for Latin America, C4D. And from private sector, we have Mr. Sehun Kim, Vice President of Hyundai Motors Group. We also have Mr. Ivar Babosted, Country Manager of Kongsberg Maritime. This session will be moderated by Dr. Hyungnam Shin, Assistant Director General of GGGI. Over to you, Dr. Shin.
Now, following a very nice presentation, we really want to some like a discussion to understand the latest development and what the success story, and also how it works or how it does not work, and how can avoid any potential challenges. So I'm going to also ask the first question. Ambassador Solberg, and I think Norway is one of the leading country in the e-mobility, across the country. And then I understand that you may have some idea how can we learn from your policy and regulatory framework, and to introduce this kind of transformation of e-mobility across your country. Yes.
Thank you very much, and thanks to both GGGI and P4G for raising a very important issue that I think is crucial for the green shift and for the global society. The changes in the transportation sector the challenges are enormous, and it's a very, very important place to succeed in order to succeed with the green ambitions and the green plan that we have ahead of us. And thank you for raising that issue. I think we have maybe just a very, very brief, let's say, umbrella issue. The transformation in the transportation sector in Norway is very important because that's one of the main polluters. We have a very green and sustainable energy system, electricity system in general. So to achieve our ambitions for 2030, 40 and 50, the transportation sector is very crucial. Our government has been very active in trying to change this, and we have seen a tremendous success over the last few years. And as you said, Dr. Shin, I think today this is not only the electric vehicle, but it's a totality of the transportation sector. But just to focus maybe on a few key points in our EV market. Today in Norway is the biggest EV market by far, based per capita. It's actually a big market in general as well, even though we only have 5.5 million people. But we have seen this tremendous change over the past few years. Today, more than 50%, actually in some months, close to 60% of all new cars in Norway are sold as EVs, clean electric. If we add hybrids into that number, we are close to 80% and sometimes over 80%, meaning that gasoline and diesel more or less is out of the equation. So this is a wonderful story. And I think this is this why Norwegians are much more greener and much more focused than anyone else? I wish I could say yes. I hope that we are very focused and cautious. But of course, this is about politics. We have cars in Norway have generally been quite expensive, different taxation regimes. So when the government decided to do something about that, incentives was of course very important. So the first point is of course it's politics, and an important part is the first I, incentives. So by reducing taxes, not increasing taxes on other vehicles, but by reducing taxes, electric cars became much cheaper than other cars. They were actually affordable to buy. And that's why we see extremely many EVs in Norway on our roads. And not only to buy the car, but also to use the car by having less road tax, the possibility to use bus lanes, possibility to free parking. So a number of different incentives were enforced and put in place in order to motivate people. Then the other aspect, very crucial explanation of the success, that's the other I, and that is infrastructure. Because it doesn't help to have many incentives if people can't use the wonderful electric vehicle they have in their garage. And of course, I think in the beginning, the people who were hesitant was maybe because of they had what we called range anxiety. They were afraid they had to look for the range gauge in the car because they hadn't a range for more than maybe 150, 200 kilometers. Over the past few years, this has changed because the market has been increasing. So then it went from range anxiety to charging anxiety. And that's where infrastructure is extremely important. By building up charging infrastructure, we managed to establish a system where people actually could use their cars. They could charge their cars almost everywhere where they're still driving. So the combination of incentives and infrastructure, I think, was the key to success. And Norway, I'm admitting, of course, that Norway, with its 5.5 million people as a market alone, is not enough to change the world. But I think it's a big enough market to prove a few things, which is quite important. And that is that it's a big enough market to make the producers, the car producers, to actually change. So it has played an important role in that extremely rapid development we have seen with regard to models, with regard to range, quality we have seen over the past few years. So that's one very important thing. And of course, also that it proves that policy can change behavior. And that is something I have said on many occasions when we talk about the EV situation in Norway. It helps. If you have a policy that is willing and able to make change, people will change behavior. And today, I think we have proven that point, that people are not, it's not only the eco fantasts who are driving EVs, but people in general. 80% of people are buying new EVs in Norway. I could, of course, also continue to say that this is, as I mentioned previously, this is not only about cars, buses, trucks. This is all about also about the shipping industry, and not least also the airline industry, which we have very high ambitions. But I know that time is scarce, so I won't make too much about that, other than saying that we are in full pace of changing the close to shore shipping industry in Norway. By next year, we'll probably have around 80 electric ferries running in Norwegian fjords, just showing that this is possible and that the green shift is really taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Solberg. Looks like really valuable lessons. We really appreciate, especially I like the combination of infrastructure and the incentive. This is very strong, like a drive to bring more like a successful story. So indeed, we learn a lot from your explanation. And also policy can change behavior. This is really important, like idea. So thank you very much. I also invite now Secretary Jasing, the Sri Lanka Ministry of Environment. So I remember like Colombo is one of the beautiful city. And then I understand that by 2040, the government of Sri Lanka is very much ambitious to increase like the electric vehicles. So I really want to see that, is there any special like electric transport target, like introduction of the e-vehicles by the time? Is there any like a regulatory side, some like a bottleneck or challenge to achieve this target by the time? Please.
Yeah. Well, let me first and foremost thank GGGI for conducting this very important conference, and P4G as well. And now, when it comes to e-mobility, I think the first and foremost is the policy to be right. So now we have the vistas of prosperity and splendor, the policy of the present government, or the policy framework of Sri Lanka, which focuses on green transport policy leading to sustainable environment and becoming a net zero carbon country later on. And then we also would like to embark on intelligent transport systems and introducing environmentally friendly buses. Now, the next is we are also into 2030 agenda for sustainable development, goals, and also the nationally determined contributions (NDCs). When it comes to NDCs, we submitted in 2016, and the NDCs, and then we are revising and having a dedicated chapter for transport sector, in which target 4 focuses on rapid transport systems for passenger transport, while target 9 focusing on promoting e-mobility and hybrid vehicles. So they will be submitted to UNFCCC soon. And then the next policy is National Transport Policy, which was formulated in 2009, a little bit old, is also working on updating the policy. We are working on updating policy, and the present policy focuses on encouraging the use of public transport, reducing the dependency on fossil fuels, and providing incentives for new hybrid technologies. And the last, the policy drive is through the Ministry of Environment. This is about Clean Air Action Plan. And presently we are operating the Clean Air Action Plan 2025, formulated to maintain the air quality at desirable levels while minimizing the emission of harmful air and pollutants. You asked about the challenges, right? So when it comes to challenges, of course, we could say that we are at the infant stages when it comes to e-mobility. I think what we can be happy is about the present government is embarking on green initiatives, not only in transport area but in other areas as well. And also the present government, for example, is going to have a limit on agrochemicals, for example. So when it comes challenges, of course, as earlier mentioned, one challenge would be upfront capital cost. And then, of course, lack of cost-benefit analysis on generating electricity by using fossil fuel for charging electricity vehicles, and the introducing financial incentives for e-mobility, and the charging infrastructure. So those would be some of the challenges that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Jasing. Indeed, to achieve your net zero target, there must be very strong a policy drive, also some strong incentive, bring more people participating in this green drive. Thank you. And next, I want to invite Minister Cleber Gatete, Rwanda Ministry of Infrastructure. We understand that currently GGGI has a good project to work with the Rwanda government in the e-mobility project, bus infrastructure, and the e-mobility project. So we just want to know that do you have any some kinds of experience enhancing the e-mobility from your side? And then any what prospect do you see for electric mobility deployment in the near future, for example, say by 2030? So I really want to see your vision and then your idea on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to share that Minister Cleber Gatete could not be available, so I'm here representing him. As the moderator said when we started this event. So concerning the, before maybe responding to the question, allow me to thank a lot GGGI, P4G, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea for organizing this important event. As Rwanda, we hope to learn from this event, as it brought together many people having experience. We have heard about Norway. I think I learned a lot, and so I thank a lot for the organizers of this event. So concerning the question that was asked, Rwanda, the electric mobility in Rwanda is still at the initial stage, but of course we have some more achievements in electric mobility, because we have currently 5 promoters of electric mobility, where we have 2 in cars. We have Volkswagen, we have Victoria Motors, while for motorcycles, we have 3 promoters. Maybe I can share a little bit of statistics very quickly, where we have currently 20 e-Golf, we have 80 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles introduced by Victoria Motors. We have around 140 electric motorcycles. And these electric vehicles and motorcycles were introduced before putting in place an enabling environment where a number of incentives were introduced. So with that, we've also a number of incentives put in place, where you can mention some where the electricity tariff for electric vehicles was brought to a third of the current electricity tariff, which was applied for electric vehicles. We also have some other incentives, like I can mention some because of the time constraint. We have also the exemption of all taxes for electric vehicles, as well as the spare parts of electric vehicles. We have also all those electric vehicles, spare parts, batteries, and charging station equipment will be treated, and now treated as VAT zero rated products. Apart from these fiscal incentives, we have also some other non-fiscal incentives, where we provide free license and authorization for commercial electric vehicles, and also access to high occupancy vehicle lanes for electric buses. I think with that combination of the incentives, as well as the commitment of the leaders of the country, as the ambassador of Norway mentioned, that it's very important, the politic will is very important in introducing electric vehicles. So with that, we think that now a required environment is, enabling environment is in place. Then we're now engaging different private sector partners, so that they can invest in charging infrastructure, because even if you have all those promoters of electric mobility, but we don't have yet charging infrastructure in place. Now, coming to the perspective, what to expect our targets, the study conducted in 2019, we set some targets, but these targets were set before putting in place the incentive that I have just mentioned. So the targets which were set through the study conducted in 2019 were that we'll achieve 30% of electric motorcycle, 8% of electric cars, 20% of electric buses, and 25% of electric taxi, or like a mini or micro buses. But with the incentives put in place recently in April, we think that we can have we can go beyond these targets. For instance, we found that, according to the study, we found that the overall cost of a motorcycle, internal combustion engine motorcycle, is quite equal. The upfront cost of an internal combustion engine motorcycle, it's the same as the cost of electric motorcycle when you use swapping model, battery swapping model. This shows that we can change all motorcycles even before 2030. So briefly, that's what I can share with you. Also, I can provide some clarifications if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General. Thank you very much for your very clear explanation. With your very brief but very concise but very detailed explanation, we are very much assisting you during the course of project development in Rwanda, like a more focus on BRT, BIS, and then charging station infrastructure improvement, and then also some regulatory policy framework side, plus also more like efficient, effective, like introduction of the e-mobility. Thank you very much. So now we are moving to colleague from Asian Development Bank, Senior Transport Specialist, Ms. Pamela Chang. I understand that Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, MDB, they are actually allocate some resources that we call like green budget for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Do we have any like, can you explain about the size of the budget, and also when you process some project, do you have any investment criteria? Maybe you may want to share with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, ADG Kelna. And thanks to the Global Green Growth Institute, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Partnership for Green Growth for inviting ADB to this very important event and session. So maybe just a brief introduction. I'm a Senior Transport Specialist from ADB, and I'm from the Transport Sector Group in ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, where we provide technical knowledge and advisory support to our transport operations. So I'm really honored to join the session today alongside other eminent panelists and look forward to share whatever I can. In terms of ADB's investment strategies, I would say that compared to roads, rail, and public transport, e-mobility is a relatively young subsector for us, in the sense that we started about 5 to 7 years ago. And so it still forms a smaller proportion of the transport portfolio at the moment. But this has really picked up in the past 2 to 3 years. And we definitely expect more e-mobility projects in the coming years, as we are committed to ramp up support to DMCs on low carbon development pathways. So in terms of infrastructure spending for transport sector, the total volume in 2020 was about 31 billion. But then of course that varies, and then the pandemic situation and all that, it's all become, a little challenging in terms of, like how the fiscal budgets are becoming quite constrained as well. So that is something that the challenges that we're also up against. But in terms of the different levers that we have in ADB, we do have, I think, pretty similar to the other MDBs and as well as GGGI. I think you mentioned technical assistance, as well as direct project loans and grants facilities to help developing member countries to progress in these areas directly. We also do have financing facilities with the private sector through our non-sovereign operations. So we're really approaching it from all angles, sovereign as well as non-sovereign support. In terms of technical assistance, I think this is a really important area that we provide to help the developing member countries, ADB's developing member countries, to explore what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and what are the barriers in country, and to identify what are the policy regulatory framework that we can help to put in place to enable successful implementation. So I'm quite excited to share that we are now wrapping up a synthesis of an e-mobility studies that were conducted across many cities in the ADB's developing member countries. So there were 17 countries and 24 cities chosen for an electric mobility study. And that is where we are in finalization stages, and we would like to share, in due course, the EV strategies that were studied and presented. What are the opportunities out there? In terms of the investments and projects in this area, to date, we have implemented quite a number of projects. I can share the Shandong trolley bus demonstration project in the People's Republic of China. So this project aims to improve environmental quality, reduce health hazards, and basically shorten the travel times, targeting zero emissions through a bus rapid transit network, complemented by policy measures, discouraging the use of private vehicles. So as you can see, it's a carrot and stick approach as well. And we also have BRT projects in Pakistan, the Peshawar Sustainable Bus Rapid Transit Corridor project that also involves public transport systems. Also the Karachi Bus Rapid Transit Red Line project in Pakistan. We also do have currently quite a number of pilot e-boats and logistics, last mile delivery kind of pilots going on in Southeast Asia. And I think one of the speakers mentioned the importance of pilots. And indeed, in ADB, we feel the same way, that pilots are the way to go to show and to demonstrate the proof of actual, its application, and as well as thereafter to share what is the experience, so as to also share the information to enhance awareness and confidence on the reliability of e-mobility. And in the pipeline, we are preparing an e-bus project in Indonesia. It's more of like an airport shuttle kind of project, so as using e-buses. And also in the People's Republic of China, a comprehensive ecological rehabilitation project. This will potentially fund e-boats as part of a sustainable tourism strategy. So the concept, I heard earlier also the, combining e-mobility with ITS. And this is also something that we're doing for this particular project, to use the advanced technology to create a platform to integrate tourism, river ecological protection management systems, combined with service modules for tourists, as well as operating these e-boats in a safe manner. So we will continue to explore opportunities in the other regions in Central West, South Asia, Southeast Asia. And we do think that Pacific also has good potential in terms of, the renewable energy. We are actually in the bank also trying to scale up renewable energy for the Pacific region. So as you can see, these are currently buses and e-boats, but going forward, we do think that there is opportunity to electrify the 2 to 3 wheelers. So we feel that it's important not just to focus on the formal transport, but also the informal transport, like 2 to 3 wheelers, tuk-tuks, and which play a huge role in first and last mile connectivity. In terms of our approach, I think in ADB, we also, as you may have sensed from the kinds of projects that I shared earlier, we do try to look for co-benefits, because our strategy 2030 is quite wide-ranging. It's poverty reduction, it is gender equality, it's about the environment, and so forth. So we look for co-benefits on how to marry advanced technology and e-mobility, how to leverage it, and how to deliver positive impact in these other thematic areas. And we also work closely across the transport with the energy sector colleagues also to kind of package cross-cutting projects. So I think the key thing also that perhaps worth sharing also, that the approach that we have taken is electrification of transport is not simply about the EV itself, but crucially how this fits with the overall delivery of the transport service to meet the transport user needs. And also the ecosystem of the business models are very important. So for example, in the projects I mentioned, you can sense that there are strong elements of improving efficiency, quality, safety of the transport system itself. So it's not just about the buses, not just about the boats, but also about the overall optimization of the public transport systems, the efficiency, the quality, and how to make that attractive for the transport user. Integration of the transport system with the land use in the urban cities, integration of fare structures in the case of the Peshawar and the Karachi bus rapid transit system. So yeah, so I think that's maybe what I can share for today. Thank you very much again for inviting ADB to participate in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Indeed, also GGGI has a very strong team, low carbon and transport sector team. And currently we are now exploring some nice projects like Sri Lanka and then also Cambodia. and Nepal, and also Uzbekistan. Very happy to have a chance to further discuss with your team and how can we cooperate together. Thank you very much. So now next to move to Mr. Sabin Basnat, Senior Energy Efficiency Specialist from GCF. So GCF is one of our Green Triangle, Green Climate Fund, and then our GGGI, and one more coming like CTCN, maybe September this year, the station, the same G Tower. So I'm very happy to further discuss with your team on this. Actually, I really want to also ask you about the investment criteria. GCF has a very strong vision. And then also, I understand that low carbon transportation is one of the important target area GCF looking for. Is there any special investment criteria, and especially, is there any your some lessons learned, good tips? How can we explore a more low carbon transportation project together with GCF? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assistant Director Sin. And thank you for the invite to this conference. It's an honor to be here with this distinguished panel and to hear so many good things, from the ambassador as well as the minister from Sri Lanka as well as from Rwanda. I think but just to kind of step back, yes, the low emission transport is is one of our 8 results areas for the GCF. And unfortunately, that's been one of the areas where we haven't done that much investment in so far. If you look at our overall portfolio, I mean, GCF today has about $8.3 billion in portfolio, out of which 5.5 billion is committed, and transport holds about $100 to $115 million of that portfolio, which is not that much. But one of the things that my team and I have done in the last couple of years is that we have actually gone out and reached out to all of our accredited entities, and I think I just want to paraphrase this a little bit, because I mean, unlike what you heard from Pam on ADB, who does direct investment, the GCF does not do direct investment. We actually invest with partners like ADB, the World Bank, other national entities. We have about 103 what we call accredited entities, and we invest through them. So we've actually reached out to them, and then we're working with them right now. And I think we have now about a pipeline which is about $1.5 billion worth of transport deals. That's on the GCF side of things. So, I mean, that's going to leverage to about somewhere in the region of $4 billion if you count everything up, and if everything gets approved. Now that's a big if. So we are working on that, and then a vast majority of this pipeline is actually going towards e-mobility. So as per your question, Director Sim, GCF basically, I mean, we are the largest climate fund. So for us, one of our biggest criteria is it's got to be a climate project. So therefore, any project that comes to us that we approve has to have the mitigation potential, which is the CO2 savings, as well as if it's possible to have an adaptation benefit to it as well, so that how are we improving the lives of the most vulnerable due to climate effects. So we've tried to build those into our programs, and then the way we've done it is for us on the transport strategy for GCF1, which is from 2020 to 2023, is we are really looking at what we call our two-prong approach, and I think this is something I would like to take from Ambassador himself as well, because I think policy is a huge deal when it comes to transport. I mean, if you look at it as is, the transport policy makeup is such a busy makeup. You have a lot of ministries, you have a lot of institutions, you have a lot of agencies coming in. And then now with electric mobility coming into play, now you're also bringing in the power ministry as well. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to policy work on transport. So therefore, we feel that we need to get that policy and enabling environment correct, because I mean, like you said, Mr. Ambassador, I mean, policy leads to behavior change, and I think behavior change is critical, vitally critical to really making things sustainable for us. And then once we kind of have that in place, and then to basically bring that down into an investment window, and then start getting the investment done. So for us, when we look at projects, we really do look at projects from both from a TA perspective. How do we bring our technical assistance in place? We have funding for technical assistance through our readiness for each country. We have 180 countries. We provide $1 million per year to these countries to actually provide this, and we actually have 2 or 3 readiness programs on transport going on right now. One big one focused in Latin America. And then we have what we call our project preparation facility. And I think one of the key issues that we've also seen during the whole sector is our accredited entities as well as project developers not having access, having funds to actually to develop projects. So we've actually have a window where we actually provide technical assistance for that as well. And we have about 3 or 4 of those going on. And then luckily, I mean, we actually have one project which should be going to our board this June, which is a result of one of our technical, our PPF projects in Costa Rica. So this, it's kind of a silver lining for us as well. And then our big thing is our funding proposals. So our funding proposals are where we really put the rubber to the road per se. And for all our funding proposals, we really look at 2 things. It is a 2-pronged approach when we try to bring in the policy planning regulation as well as an implementation and investment part that fits into that, so that it just so one thing that we've said is like we have the policies and we have the planning, but we would like to say we want to be doing more actionable policies, so policies that can actually be translated to investment markups as soon as possible. I mean, instead of a policy just being sitting on the shelf of a ministry, to actually have that policy start on the ground. So we really try to work with our AEs to really kind of bring that kind of a flavor into the project, so that we're really bringing that in. And then the other part really is, I think one of the things that I think Pam was also mentioning as well, is that that we have incentives. There are countries that are bringing in different types of incentives to get electric mobility in place, and we heard from Dr. Jay Singer that capex is a big issue for getting e-mobility, because e-mobility projects are almost 2 to 3 times more expensive than your regular project. But just providing a grant subsidy, it may not be the only solution. So we're looking at how do we develop business models that are actually sustainable, and how can we really kind of bring in the public sector with private sector, so that we can actually marry those 2 things together. I mean, one of the ideas that we're working on, especially on the Costa Rica, is to really kind of bring in the capex on the infrastructure side with the government of Costa Rica, and then bring in the private sector more on the operation and maintenance, so that the concession becomes more of an OPEX as opposed to capex. So therefore, then you're kind of trying to bridge that gap between the infrastructure cost versus the operating costs that are coming in. So I mean, this is just one example, but there are so many different ways of doing this. Bringing in transport as a service, as well as factoring, and then bringing in other kinds of financing to the OEMs. And then on our private sector side of things, we are actually working with a couple of projects right now, where we're looking at OEMs, and then how do we bring OEMs into the game to really kind of be that supply side fixture on a more of a demand-based mechanism. So we're, it is a lot of work that's going on, but the for us, the good thing is, like I said, our pipeline is growing, and what I've seen today as well is, there's a lot of interest in this from across the spectrum as well. So we are really looking forward to this, and we would basically reach out to all of you to please, I think all of you, especially Sri Lanka, Rwanda, you are one of our member countries. So please come to us, see what you guys need, as well as ADB, as well as and Norway is a contributor. So we're all partners here, as well as GGGI. So I think it is a collective that we're trying to look at And I think, going it alone never helps, doesn't do anything. So I think, having that singular, group voice coming together and really kind of, seeing what can work and what cannot work would be the best way of going forward. And then we as GCF are really looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabine. Yes, I'm very glad to see you have $1.5 billion US like a standby for the green transportation project. So we are very happy to also work with you, and then with our strong pipeline. And also we want to tap more like a co-financing to maybe double up your the resource like impact. So let's move to next panelist, Mr. Manuel Olivero, Regional Director for Latin America, P4G. My understanding is actually you may want to share some nice experience like your and good lessons learned, and then also we really want to see some like any good like prospect you see from the electric mobility deployment in the near future, like by 2030. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really honored to be among such distinguished panelists. So thanks again. Well, few Latin American cities are leaders in the world regarding the deployment of zero-emission fleets for public transport. That is an experience that can be shared easily around the world. All started in Latin America when, thanks to a grant from the Inter-American Development Bank, the first electric bus was tested by C40 in 2011. It took 7 years, discussions, research, workshops, site visits, tests, until the first commercial deal for 100 electric buses was closed in December 2018. President Piñera of Chile launched that fleet. Private sector in Chile jumped from testing 3 buses to put it on the road, those 100 buses, and then 750 more. The national government supported those deals. Chile then tendered 2,000 more, electric or fossil buses or a mix. Bogota started testing 3 electric buses, and with a public tender in 2019, 483 were awarded. Then in 2020, Bogota jumped high and awarded another 1,000 electric buses. Other cities in Latin America have slowly gone for electric buses too, like Medellin, Guadalajara, Montevideo, and like Mexico City, also adding trolley buses with batteries, completing 290 out of 500 that the mayor aims to have in place. I made this summary because it's usually forgotten that there is a huge amount of work that has been required to create confidence among different stakeholders, like transport authorities, bus operators, banks, bus suppliers, and other NGOs, in order to reach the mentioned figures. And also to help understanding what is necessary to keep the target of transforming a fleet of more than 25,000 buses in just 5 C40 cities by 2030, aiming to double the goal by 2040 throughout Latin America. So far, 2 great leapfrogs have taken place. First, a general understanding of the benefits behind electric buses, like their role in the urgent greenhouse gases reduction, health improvement thanks to zero emissions through the exhaust, green jobs creation, energy efficiency, and the like. The second one is that new business models are now applied and made capital funds and electric utility companies big players. In fact, the involvement of investors left behind commercial banks with their difficulties or fear to participate in these long-term businesses. The pandemic, however, has affected seriously the pace of the transition, as it took away at least half of the income of the transport systems and a large part of the city's revenues too. Despite this difficult reality, cities keep being the main protagonists in the transition towards zero-emission buses, as most of them have the power to procure, although in a few cases, some national governments have powers too. Fortunately, we have Zebra, the ICCT C40 project financed by P4G. With the technical support of ICCT, Zebra is maximizing the experience C40 has collected along the years. For instance, Zebra has gathered together officials from 35 cities for them to use the best information available and to make decisions. And also bus suppliers and financiers for all together to break the final walls that might still stand along the road of the transition towards zero emission in public transport. In fact, some investors already locked for 15 years more than $350 million on the new 1,000 electric buses in Bogota, using innovative business models fostered by Zebra. The appetite of investors in electric bus projects is increasing as we speak. Some capital funds are ready to invest on thousands of buses at once, but few cities can cope with such figures. Say, for instance, São Paulo, where 16,000 buses need renovation. This is a $6 billion business that requires tailored solutions for each of the 20 bus operators that hold 15 years contracts and need to have CO2 emissions by 2028. Based on my long experience in Latin America, what is now required is, first of all, properly structured projects in cities, and secondly, guarantees for investors' payback. At the end of the day, with projects available, investors need to see real guarantees for the investments to be returned with profits, either based on cities' revenues or on sovereign funding. Working in this line, which with cities in a green and just recovery, I would like to end my talk with a provocative question now that I had heard my colleague from the Green Climate Fund. How cities can count ASAP on the Green Climate Fund for a swift and direct involvement to scale up the zero-emission public transport? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Looks like a very useful idea and suggestion. Indeed, I also think that we may need some combined of sovereign and then private sector project when we explore some e-mobility low carbon project in our partner country, like as for example, public infrastructure, some funded by the sovereign loan, and some private sector maybe spend more their experience during the course of operation and maintenance. So let's see. So this is good suggestion. We can also take a look at how can we improve our way of thinking. Thank you. And then let's move to another panelist, Mr. Se-Hun Kim, Vice President, Hyundai Motor Group. And then I understand that Hyundai Motor Group is now also producing a hydrogen car, and then it looks like you are one of the leading company worldwide. And then when you pursue this kind of hydrogen car, you may also maybe confronted with several barrier challenge. For example, you may need also how can effectively distribute and then also explore the best practice of your hydrogen car with battery system, charging station, infrastructure, and then also the vehicle itself. Do you have any idea, your perspective or vision, how can you explore expansion of your hydrogen car in the coming years?
Thank you for giving me opportunity to speak my ideas. Actually, Hyundai Motor Company have been developing battery electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles more than 20 years. It was the vision, we had a vision that in some time in the future, electric vehicles will be used, and also hydrogen vehicles. So actually, the transportation mobility devices has to follow energy. In the 19th centuries, we used coal, so we developed steam engine, yeah. And in 20th century, we found petroleum, and we developed ICE engines, internal combustion cars. And now, I think we finally came to the time point where we can use renewable electricity and renewable hydrogen. And we welcome this carbon neutral idea of by 2050, because if we really want to save this world, I think we have to be carbon neutral. I'm a believer of global warming also. But when I visit some panel discussions or other meetings, always the discussions start with how to prevent global warming, and it moves to economy. Human being is an economical animal, so we always find the economical way. But as you all know, the early technology cannot be cheap. Internal combustion has been developed more than 100 years. And battery was a little bit easier because we used battery for other devices for a long time, and we had electricity for a long time. But hydrogen, it is, even people didn't know it was energy. It was used as a chemical element for, feedstock in the chemical industry. But now it is at least handled as an energy today. But it is just a few years ago. So we do not have hydrogen infrastructure. So in order to spread this new technology, we have to think other way, I think. I love the idea of Norway. Ambassador Solberg has already told us that, making the new technology cheaper, that is the best way. But it is very difficult because, for example, we produce only 10,000 fuel cell vehicles per year, but our company produces 7 million ICE internal combustion engine cars. We are not having the advantage of mass production even today. So why don't we think other way? We make CO2 producing technology expensive. That is what Norway has done. So Norway has put 180% tax or something to the internal combustion engine vehicles. So I was really surprised when I visited Norway in 2013 and tried to sell my fuel cell vehicle. Our fuel cell vehicle was very expensive, but at Norway, the cost was almost same, even then, in 2013. So I was really surprised. So I think the situation is different from country to country. Every region will be different, but we have to find a way that if the global warming is so dangerous and we have to survive, we have to prioritize surviving to the economy. So we have to spend. But if we provide subsidy, it is a zero-sum game sometimes. Even today, battery OEMs who builds only electric vehicles wants only electric charger, and for us, we are equal. We are we are neutral. We support electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles at the same time, hydrogen vehicles at the same time. But it is always headache for OEMs. So in Korea, we had almost same failure what we made in the early days. That was in Korea, we were developing we are subsidizing solar energy, wind energy, and hydrogen energy at the same time, but the fund was one pocket, so it was zero-sum game. So the solar guys and wind guys and hydrogen guys cannot cooperate each other. They fight to get the subsidy. Yeah, so it was not friends, it was enemy. Yeah, how can it go very smoothly? Because we all have to cooperate now and find a way how to really support this new technology and renewable energy. So I think we have been successful. developing the technologies. In the past, there was not enough technology, but now battery technology, fuel cell technology can serve, but still expensive. We have to overcome this in a very good political way, I think. And what can I say? So now there is some kind of regulations or announcements like we should not sell any more internal combustion engine by 2035. Even IEA stated that at the recent report, but also many countries are already stating that, because if one car is made, it will last for 15 years. And if we truly want to become carbon neutral in 2050, we have to stop selling by 2035. So I think we have to have concrete plan how to go, and not picking up some models or things like that. We have to make this really zero emission and zero CO2 technology cheaper than the CO2 producing technology. I think that is the best way. And I'm not a politician, so I think holy-minded politicians should find that way. But now the people only who has a holy mind, who really want to rescue the world, invest here. Even they know that the break-even doesn't come early enough. So now only some of selected funding, the financing companies are investing. But I think when, if we politically make renewable technology or non-CO2 technology more cheaper, everyone will invest. So this is what I felt, always talk about saving the world from the global warming, then go to economy, TCO, total cost of ownership. So that is the dilemma. And I think we should solve that somehow. And I think, this meeting or other politicians' discussions, they find the right way to solve this problem. I'm sure that it is not for a long time. If we really go for this technology, it will come cheaper. Yeah, that is for sure. I found no reason why this new battery or fuel cell or other hydrogen technologies should be expensive, because sun is shining and we can get the raw energy, which is the sunshine, for free. So I think it will come, but we should find the right way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Seon-Kim, Vice President, Hyundai Motor Group. Indeed, policy is a very strong tool changing people's behavior. And also you're mentioning about some fuel cell and then hydrogen. GGGI is very much committed to explore the best efficient, effective way, for example, hydrogen and then other renewable energy projects. So we will keep you informed of further progress in due course. Thank you. And then now, my last panelist, Mr. Iba Belbost, a country manager, Kongsberg Maritime. You wait for a long time, so thank you so much for your waiting. So I understand that your company has very expensive operations, and then the good business experience, a small island developing state, and sea transportation also. So can you share with us your best practice, lessons learned and good experience to be for sharing with us? And also, is there any some challenge you have been you have been confronted with, and then challenge and the issue? I'm very happy to also learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. As a representative from the shipping industry, it's interesting to hear and learn about your experiences from the e-vehicle rollout in different parts of the world. And I can assure you, it's the same sort of challenges we face in the shipping industry as we face in the e-vehicle industry. And I believe it's actually the same solutions to the problems as well. For those of you not familiar with the Kongsberg brand, let me share a few facts here. Kongsberg Maritime is a part of the Kongsberg Group, a Norwegian company. dealing with. We have a defense part, we have a maritime part, and we have a digital part. We have been 40, 50 years in the shipping industry, supplying technology for the shipping industry. And we are basically around the world within 40 different countries and 8,000 employees. So a fairly large supplier in that area. Our vision is actually world-class through people, technology, and dedication. And in the middle of that is technology. We firmly believe that our technology will be able to help ship owners and shipyards and ship designers to reach their goals in terms of operational safety or environmental issues, as we are talking about in this case. But we are not. The only thing we don't do in this business, we don't do engines. We don't make engines. So in that sense, we are not really a driver in what fuel will prevail in the future and what fuel will be the future of the shipping industry. But we have quite extensive experience in electrification of the shipping industry. Just to give you a little idea on the industry as it is today, there are about, give or take, depending how you count, 100,000 vessels running commercial shipping today. About 500 of them is running on low emission fuel at the point, most of them LNG. Very few vessels are running on batteries or hybrid systems or e-systems in any way. There are about the same number, a little bit more, under construction, which means that by the end of the year or by the end of 2022, there will be maybe 2% of the vessels running on low emission fuel. So we have a long way to go before we can reach the goals for 2050. So how can we solve this? Well, the good news is there are technology available. But the bad news is maybe that the beauty of fossil fuel, if there ever was one, is that you can use fossil fuel for all kinds of shipping applications, shipping segments, from the smallest tug to the smallest ferry to the biggest container vessel. So fossil fuel is a very efficient energy bearer. So I guess in the future, even though Mr. Singh mentioned that by 2050 we'll have 3.1 gigawatts batteries, I still don't think there will be any technology that will carry through in the same type of penetration as fossil fuel. There will be different technologies for different types of vessels. The closest we are to electrification in the industry today is on the near shore or the small near coastal vessels, where we have plenty of technology. We have all the technology necessary to electrify any types of vessel, be it ferries, as Mr. Solberg said. Next year there will be 80 ferries in Norway running on pure electric. There will be a number of vessels running on a hybrid solution, coastal vessels, small passenger vessels, and so on. There will be a demand in the market for greener both transportation in terms of customers owning the cargo and passengers in, for example, the cruise industry. So there will be a pressure all across to greenify the industry, if you like. And there are technology available. In Kongsberg, we have a joint venture with the Norwegian Hydro Yara, a famous fertilizer producer, where we will produce an electrical barge. It's on sea trial at the moment, where we will actually replace 40,000 truckloads of container truckloads annually, driving through densely populated areas with an electrical autonomous vessel. And here we are at one of the key points. One of the ways that we can increase the penetration of electrical or e-shipping is to make, as many of you have been promoting here, we need to make the technology attractive. We need to make it possible or attractive for the owners to use this technology. And as many of you have said, the CapEx problem is one thing. You will have to invest in equipment that is more expensive than the fossil fuel. You will have to invest in infrastructure. And you will have very few vessels to share this cost. So the CapEx part is extremely difficult to solve. And if you also include that the OpEx part is difficult to see that it's lower OpEx to run an electrical vehicle compared to a fossil fuel vehicle, the whole equation doesn't really add up. So we have actually had the same incentives. I think the same incentives that we're working for the for the e-vehicle market in Norway on electric vehicles will actually work on the e-vessel or e-shipping systems as well. If you provide incentives for owners to invest in e-shipping, it will happen. And in Kongsberg, we firmly believe that one of the things you have to do in order to make this attractive, change the business model, change the incentives, and make sure it's OPEX friendly to run e-shipping. And we think that autonomy and digitalization is the key to do that. And this here is where it gets difficult for the ship owners, because autonomy is a very, how can I say, complicated issue, in the sense that there are incredibly many stakeholders involved in that. There will be local authorities, national authorities, global authorities, global organizations, shipment or shipping companies, fisheries, other users of the sea space, many class societies, to name a few. So in order to but all the pieces are there in order to make these near coastal vessels electrified. We only need to put them together. And that is, from my point of view, a political issue. We need to make sure that politicians state their ambitions to electrify the near coastal shipping industry, and by that making sure that everybody has an incentive, all the stakeholders have incentives to reach this target. So that is, as you mentioned, Mr. Shin, this is maybe the biggest barrier in terms of electrifying the shipping industry. When it comes to the other part of the shipping industry, or there are many parts, but the other major part of it, deep ocean shipping, that means long distance shipment. There we have a larger challenge, bigger challenge. So even though we will see fuel cells, we will see battery increase, I don't see that we will be able to replace all the fossil transportation over long distance for a very long time. Basically because it requires a lot of energy. And one of the problems we have in the shipping industry is that the vessels we build today, they will have a lifetime of 30 to 40 years. That means that if they are going to be carbon neutral by 2050, they will need to adapt to a new technology during lifetime, which means that we already now have to adapt the vessels so they can be modified and rebuilt to a carbon neutral technology, which is of course very difficult when we don't know what that technology is going to be. So that's a different challenge. But the same thing there, I don't think we will see autonomy in any great deal in terms of long distance shipping, but there are certainly other challenges in that area. So I think that was basically some of the challenges that we see, but also some of the solutions we actually can see in terms of incentives and reducing the threshold for owners to go electric.
Thank you. So may I will ask for some session panel discussion, conclusion of panel discussion. Ask my Director General to make a very brief message.
Thank you, Kyon. On the schedule, it said 5-minute conclusions by you, but you've passed that to me. I'm also seeing that it's almost 11 p.m. on a Friday night here in Seoul, so I realize it's surprising you're all still here. But I have made a few points to just sum up what we heard and things that struck me, and there were quite a few. I think they started off with Ambassador Solberg saying 80% of people in Norway are buying EVs. I think that is a very strong statement, and I think it shows indeed his other point that several people brought up, that policy can change behavior. I think that, but then of course, that policy does cost money, right? So it is not exactly for free. We heard from several financiers, ADB, GCF, that they're active in this space, that currently their share of sustainable transport and e-mobility is still pretty small, like 110 million for GCF, but they have a pipeline of $1.5 billion for the GCF contribution, meaning 4 to 5 billion total. That I think is a pretty impressive amount of funding flowing into this just from GCF, if you like. So that I think shows that in the next couple of years we can expect to see a big change. I'm not sure whether that will entirely help with the problem that a number of us brought up, that CapEx is a big issue that has to be overcome through some concessional finance, possibly. Although I noticed that the Director General from Rwanda was actually a bit more positive about the business model, where I think through battery swapping, CapEx can be turned into OpEx, and that makes it a bit easier to see how you can at least overcome the initial hurdle of the buying price. Then we had a very positive note from C40, where I think, despite the warning note from Mr. Oliveira that it took 7 years from testing the first bus to rolling them out at scale, but there are now a few cities in Latin America where they are actually procuring thousands of buses. So that target from C40 to have 25,000 e-buses in C40 cities suddenly doesn't look that difficult anymore. And indeed, you also mentioned a doubling of that target for 2040. So I think that is a pretty good signal that not only in a country like Norway, but in public transport in Latin America, there is a pretty deep penetration of e-buses already and certainly going forward as well. So how to replicate that in other cities, I think, like in Asia and in Africa, is very interesting. So yes, for I think Hyundai and for new technology in general, you know, you didn't quite say it like this, but basically you had a strong argument to price carbon, right? If we price carbon to make zero carbon technology the cheapest technology available, then we suddenly don't really have an adoption or acceleration problem anymore. So back to COP26, where we finally, hopefully, will have Article 6 and carbon pricing, hopefully leading to an active carbon market. I think many of the things we were discussing here would be very different if we had actual carbon prices at the $50 to $75 rates, where scientists say we would see some real action. We finally had a look at shipping. We mostly talked about e-vehicles and land transport, of course, but maritime shipping is a very important segment to also be tackled. And we heard, actually, if I don't do the speaker justice, that challenges and solutions in shipping are basically the same as for e-vehicles. I think that would go for nearshore shipping then, which is when we did the LEDs for Fiji, the low emission development strategy for Fiji, we had a similar thing, but we noted that more than half of all the fossil fuels went in nearshore shipping, cross harbor little trips with outboard engines, and only less than half went into the inter-island long-term shipping. So that nearshore section could be quite important. And there you basically gave examples where there are solutions available and, you know, both technology and policy solutions. So it could be tackled just like for e-vehicles. But you noticed, of course, that for ships, and I would say also airplanes and so on, some other sections of the transport sector, there are some bigger and more deep technology challenges. That was my quick sum up of, I think, most of the key things I heard. I know that I didn't do justice to all of the useful things you said, but back to you, Mr. Panel Chair. I certainly, listening to it, enjoyed the panel very much. So thank you for all the panelists and speakers. I do see Ian de Cruz pop up. Ian, closing words. I don't know if you've been hanging out there, if you've been lurking the whole session, or if you've just tuned in. But anyway, if you were just tuning in, we had a good session. Over to you.
I have been lurking the whole time, just
cool.
try to stay under the radar and listen to the excellent speakers speak. So thank you, Frank, and for GGGI for hosting such an insightful and applied discussion on how we can scale zero emissions transportation future for all. I think there's an opportunity we see for joining forces as a coalition of early movers to bring this global value chain together for zero emissions transportation and how to integrate this with energy systems. The work we are doing here is not in isolation. It is within a global agenda to deliver energy transition, where we see a once-in-a-generation transformation of energy, transport, and heavy industry all happening at the same time. This work moves beyond traditional capacity building and technical assistance. In this critical decade of action, our focus should be on commercial deployment of vehicles and ships, as was highlighted by C40, for example, through the Zebra partnership, in electric buses, there is the large-scale deployment that is happening now. And we want to see how actors like GGGI, GCF, and ADB with us can catalyze this. So let us work together on developing that systematic pipeline of partnerships where we can leverage the cutting-edge technology and investment from companies like Hyundai, the investment from institutions like the Green Climate Fund and ADB to catalyze the investment required, and the solutions emerging from C40, GGGI, and P4G based on the lessons learned from our developing countries. So as we sort of look at the net zero future, we're looking for integrated solutions as part of a larger transformation where we need to look at renewable energy sources, charging infrastructure, and investment models that can lead to the ultimate goal, which is commercial deployment. This energy and transport transformation is already happening, but we will need to channel our efforts scaling the most prospective partnerships for commercial deployment at the speed and scale required in this critical decade of action. So we look forward to working with you all on this mission of delivering an inclusive net zero future for all. Thank you, Frank.
We'll say thank you. Have a great evening. More wonderful P4G sessions.
Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your time with us. And I wish you all a comfortable weekend too, and evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice.
Sanida.
Samida.